Hello, classmates. Are you ready for chapter 4? Do you have your book ready to go? And do you have something to write on and something to write with? Alrighty, then here we go. In our journey so far, we have been discussing what marketing is, all the plans and planning stages, and we have looked at the environment that we're doing all the marketing activities in. So now it is time to talk about data. Yes, lots of numbers, no worries, because we won't be doing a lot of math here. However, we do have to look at the data points. What do we need? How do we know that we need it? And what do we do with them? Where do we get them from? All those kinds of stuff. So it's a full chapter. Set aside some time for this one. Let's go and look at what our focus is. 3 of them: the 4 steps in the marketing research process. Then part of the research process, of course, is how do companies analyze and use them? And another level that encompasses all of them is the ethics of uh, collecting and using the data. And here we go. Let us first look at one of my favorite stories. It's in our textbook on page 126. Target, everybody knows Target, right? When were you at the Target store last? So Target has created an incredible data analytics process, and they found a way to really kind of almost predict customers' needs and from their previous purchases. So one day, a father of a teenage girl, walks into his local Target, demands to talk to the manager, and says, "I can't believe you're doing this. This is not right. You're sending my daughter all kinds of new babies ads, and that is just wrong. That is not moral." The manager for the Target, to his credit, apologized and promised to look into it and remove that. A couple of days later, the father calls the Target manager and apologizes himself. Turns out the Target store chain knew before the dad that his daughter was pregnant. Hmm. Hmm. Moving in, outline the 4 steps. That is an easy one on our page 106. We're looking at those 4 boxes, 4 steps, 4 boxes. Oh boy, and let's start on the left side here. First, and this harkens back to our planning chapter, we need to know where we want to end up, right? So we need to know what exactly is the problem and what are we trying to achieve. Then we need to have a plan about how and where and when are we going to get the information, the data we need. Then we need to go ahead and do it. And finally, just because there are a bunch of numbers out there, that doesn't mean anything until we put it in context and analyze it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 4 things. And there are companies out there, very famous companies, that specialize and help us. So the one in San Francisco, and they just had their huge conference called Dreamforce, is Salesforce. They built that, and this is what they do. This is what's called a dashboard, by the way. Right, so these were the 4 steps in the marketing research process. 1, 2, 3, 4. Moving on to how do the companies analyze and use marketing information. And this is where a difficult looking graph comes in, but please, no freakouts. Here it is on page 102, because you are following along, right? Let's start in the middle again, starting with the left side here. First, again, harkens back to our chapter 2, assessing what information do we actually need, what data do we need. And that can come either from The marketing managers, they decide, yeah, let's do research on this or that, or it can come from the marketing environment because, for example, the sales of a specific product have gone down, and so there is pressure now of finding out what is going on. First, we look at the internal databases, and that means that's data that's pretty easy to get. We're getting those from all of these because every company collects all kinds of data. Even DVC, which is, of course, a company or an organization. Then, after that, we're looking at the marketing intelligence. Remember that one? And finally, we're looking at marketing research, which is specifically for that information need that we talked about here. We're going to go and design a whole marketing research project. Then after we have that, we analyze the information and boom, we feed it back to who needs it. And that will, of course, also influence our environment. So again, it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. It's very logical, don't you think? Now, there are two types of data points that we can work with. The first one is what's called a secondary data set. And we're going to start with that. And heads up, there is a primary data set coming. Secondary data means it's already existing. The advantages are, hey, they're already there. That means low cost and quick. However, there is a danger because all the data was collected for a different purpose, right? It wasn't collected for the one that we are right now thinking about. So we need to be careful when we use existing data, secondary data with this. We at least need to be aware of the fact. Moving on to primary data. Primary data means that we decide what kind of data we're looking for, we design that plan, and then we go out and collect it. And these are all the contacts and how we're going to do that. I wonder whether anybody has participated in a focus group. When I was a student at DVC, I participated in several focus groups by a marketing company in Concord. They paid very well, like $100 for an hour or an hour and a half, and that was in 91 or so, so that was a lot of money. And that, however, think about it, that is really expensive for the company to finance, right? Not only do they need to pay me, the participant, but also the marketing professional who conducts this, and then they need to talk about it. So that it's really expensive. However, it's usually very effective. A sampling plan means that we need to think about who exactly do we want to look at here as far as segmentation is concerned. And this is where maybe you remember that from our last chapter when we looked at demographics. Sampling means that we look at a representative slice of the whole thing that we can't possibly look at. So for example, if Forever 21 wants to look at 17-year-old females that are in their senior year of high school, they can't possibly look at everybody, right? They can't interview everybody, but they can select a sample that stands in for all of it. And that is the sampling unit. So exactly who are we looking for? How big does the sample size need to be? Again, this is this compared to that. And how are we selecting those participants? Now, we have just learned a little bit about how the companies analyze and use that information, and it's time to move on to the ethical question around that. It is our responsibility as marketing professionals to help set up and enforce a research ethics and standards of conduct for the company that we're involved with. And so we need to look deep inside ourselves and say, what are my ethics around this here? This was our journey so far in this short lecture. The 4 steps in marketing research. How do companies analyze and use the information, and the ethical part of this. And with that, go ahead and complete that short lecture quiz and have fun with this chapter.